Hello, Jeff Zwerink here, and welcome again to Give and Take. This is the segment of our show where we explore fascinating and interesting scientific topics to help you be more confident in the truth of Christianity. Today I'm joined by President of Reasons to Believe, Hugh Ross, and we're going to investigate just how close are astronomers to finding life somewhere beyond the confines of the solar system. Hugh, it's good to have you here again today.
Well, thank you.
So this is something that people talk a lot about. I mean, there's been a lot of headlines, oh, we found habitable planets. It kind of gives the impression we're right on the borderline of finding life out in the universe. But yet it seems like we're always just on the borderline. It never happens. So what is it that's so difficult about finding life beyond here on Earth?
Well, the difficulty is coming up with an actual chemical signature of life. I mean, Buzz Rod and I were at a conference in the Origin of Life that said the only way we're ever going to have a signal of life is if we see ozone in the planet's atmosphere. Because here on Earth, it's life that produces molecular oxygen, and from that we get ozone. Ozone produces a very sharp, distinguishable spectral line. So they said that's really our only hope of ever being able to detect the possible existence of life on another planet.
Okay. So it seems like there's at least one problem of you've got to find something that is a signature of life that isn't, or that we see here on Earth that presumably as we're looking at other planets would be a signature. It seems like it's actually difficult to actually find anything on another planet in the first place when you get outside our solar system. Is that not correct?
This particular conference was making the point that the technology is at hand to see ozone spectral lines on planets that have the features that would at least indicate a possibility.
So can we find light signatures from other planets outside our solar system?
Well, I remember talking with the person who gave this paper and saying, is ozone really a unique signal for life? And they said, it's the best one we got.
Right.
But a paper just got published making the point that there's a lot of ways you can get ozone in a planet's atmosphere without any life being there at all. Bottom line, they were saying, if you've got a moist atmosphere and you don't have a huge amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere like you do on Earth, you will get molecular oxygen, you will get ozone, and it'll have nothing to do with life on that planet.
Oh, okay. So kind of let's take a little bit of a step back there because, okay, so we're looking for oxygen. Oxygen is obviously incredibly important to life here on Earth.
Well, for our kind of life.
Our kind of life. Yeah. And the challenge there is that oxygen is incredibly reactive. We think, 20% of oxygen in the atmosphere, that's no big deal. But given how reactive oxygen is, that means it's got to be regularly resupplied into the atmosphere.
Right.
So that's presumably why looking for ozone, which is another form of oxygen, that's why that's a signature of life, because given how reactive any sort of oxygen is, presumably it would just react and not be any free oxygen in the atmosphere. Is that basically the thought process there?
That's the thought process, and the idea is that ozone is a lot easier to detect than molecular oxygen in a planet's atmosphere, so that's what we should go for.
Okay, can you give a little bit of explanation? Why is ozone easier to detect than just regular oxygen?
Well, it's much rarer than oxygen, but it produces a unique spectral line that's really distinct and bright. And so that's why they say, hey, it's going to be really hard to try to do it with oxygen, but ozone, that's an easy way to go.
Okay. So oxygen has some signatures. Those might be difficult to separate from other things. Ozone, if it's there, it's going to have a distinct signature. Now, the problem is, what you're alluding to there is that even if we find ozone, that's not a unique signature of life, or life isn't the only way you're going to get the ozone.
Well, as you know, water is a very abundant molecule in the universe.
Correct.
It comes right after hydrogen 2 and hydrogen 3. So the universe, as I remind people, is soaking wet.
Right.
So likely
that sounds bizarre, but it is. Water is the third most abundant molecule in the universe.
It is. And so having a planet with a moist atmosphere, if it's in the liquid water habitable zone, is almost a given. And what these scientists were pointing out, unless the planet has a huge amount of molecular nitrogen in its atmosphere like Earth does, you're going to get from non-life mechanisms a whole lot of oxygen and ozone. And therefore they're saying ozone and oxygen are only possible signatures for life if you already know that the planet's atmosphere has about 80% nitrogen in it, just like the Earth.
Now, I will say, if we go out and find a planet that has free oxygen in its atmosphere, that may not, if I get what you're saying, it's not a definitive signature, but it's certainly very provocative and would indicate to people that this planet has certainly a very good chance of finding or being life there.
I would argue possible, but not probable, because having a planet with 80% nitrogen in its atmosphere is going to be a rare outcome.
Okay, but let's say, regardless, say we find some sort of signature that looks like there's life there. What if we find life? What does that mean? And kind of looking at it from an evangelistic standpoint, whenever these announcements of life come out, we're pretty excited about it. So it's an opportunity to talk about it. How do we use that search for life to transition to a conversation about the gospel?
Well, there's a lot of Christian astronomers I know, Jeff, who argue that the discovery of life on another planet would be a huge benefit for the Christian faith, because we already know it takes supernatural intervention for the origin of life. So if we find another planet, that means God did it twice.
That's a different, I want to just highlight that because that's so different than the way it often comes across. It's so rare for the conditions for life to be met that here on earth is the only place we expect it. What you're saying, if I get what you're saying correct, is that we don't expect life here on earth unless God intervened. So if we find it somewhere else, that's another signature of God intervening.
Well, theologically, it looks like God really enjoys creating, just based on what we see here on earth, just how full our planet is of life and how long it's been here. And so from that perspective, it's like if God enjoys creating that much, why would he stop on one planet?
So as a Christian, we don't have to really be that worried about what we're going to find out there, that we might actually find life, and that would be perfectly consistent with God creating it.
Either way, it's an exciting breakthrough for the Christian faith. If we're unique, that tells us something, that God basically is targeting our planet to bring about the ultimate conquest of evil, entry into the new creation. If there's lots of planets with life on, it's like, wow, this shows just how much God enjoys creating. And so I'd be excited either way, but you and I know, looks like so far the evidence is telling us that Earth seems to be unique, because everywhere we look, we're not finding conditions beyond Earth that are suitable for life.
Well, and I would argue it's pretty hard, it's pretty challenging to find those signatures, so we may just not be able to.
We may not be able to do it.
I'm with you. I'm excited one way or the other. Whether we find life or we're rare, that does a lot to give us reasons to go talk about the Creator and how he's fashioned us to live life. Thanks, Hugh. I appreciate your comments. This is something that people just enjoy talking about, the prospect of finding life beyond the confines of Earth. I do have to say, when I first personally was exposed to the idea, it seemed like it was kind of a threat. Would that mean that God wasn't the creator? And as I investigated it, and as Hugh outlined here, that whether God created life just here on Earth, and that's a very distinct possibility, or whether he created it throughout the universe, all of that life is going to be a signature pointing back to him. I would encourage you to go to reasons.org and check out Hugh's blog, Is Ozone and Oxygen a Signature for Life?, so that you can be better equipped to use this search for life in your conversations where you get to go out and tell others about Christ.